Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Brianna Maitland series. This is episode 3, Case Solved. Has the Brianna Maitland case been solved all along, unofficially? And how many people would know about this? We are digging deep in typical Mindshock fashion with logic and reason at the forefront, while trying to discern fact from fiction, rumor from actuality, in what happened to Brianna Maitland. If you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting and informative, want to help support keeping up awareness in cases, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case, topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. Leave them in the comment section. So obviously the Montgomery case has a lot of attention, especially after the Oxygen documentary. However much of a sham it was, it brought attention to the case. The Brianna Maitland case is a lot more under the radar, even though it happened within weeks of the Montgomery disappearance, and it's obviously deserving of much more attention and awareness to get this solved. And it's so tragic and haunting in its own way, partially because of the photos of the abandoned car, Brianna Maitland's car, at an unnatural angle backed into an actual building, an abandoned building, which is also pretty scary looking. And then, of course, just the general tragedy of a young woman going missing under mysterious and possibly violent circumstances. Her previous history of involvement with drug dealers, just bullying teenagers, issues with school, and her break from all this negativity in her life and moving on to more positivity and moving away from a lot of these negative influences who did not want to let her go. I mean, this is actually relatively common in the drug world with a lot of criminals and people who kind of don't want to see their friend, so-called friends, obviously they're not really their friend, but people in their circle move on to bigger and better because that makes them feel worse about themselves, and they want to keep those people in their circle. So the fact that she was pulling away and from this negativity to better herself and her life, and was denied that, allegedly, again, there's no body, but it's just so tragic for so many different reasons, and of course a case deserving of just the utmost examination and awareness to get it solved. But there are so many curiosities in this case, and there seems to be enough information to solve it. But has it already been solved? So as we went over in the previous episode, the new DNA in 2022, the DNA result from a new lab that matches a person of interest. Not a suspect per se, but a known person of interest. There's no shortage of persons of interest in this case. So there's a lot of things that don't make sense. As we went over in the previous episode, apparently she was warned not to go to work that night. And if there was a drug dealer involved, was he a CI and protected by law enforcement, even if he was responsible for what happened to Brianna Maitland? So let's start with this very, very interesting post just a few months ago on Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, an excellent subreddit for various cases. This was posted by Lorette Mort. Brianna Maitland revisiting the crime scene photos. With the recent announcement of a DNA link being made between the crime scene and a known person of interest, the Brianna Maitland case seems to be moving forward finally, hopefully toward a long-awaited conclusion. I've become quite interested in the case since the announcement, but haven't found anything approaching a detailed analysis of the crime scene photos online. She disappeared in 2004 after leaving her job at the Black Lantern Inn in Montgomery, Vermont. She was 17 years old at the time. Maitland's car was discovered the following day backed into the side of an abandoned house about a mile away from her workplace. She has not been seen or heard from since. For those new to the case, the police bungled the early investigation of the Dutchburn House crime scene and had the car towed under the assumption it was simply a drunk driver that had crashed and abandoned the car. Fortunately, a group of tourists were passing by the morning of Brianna's disappearance and found the scene of the crashed car bizarre enough to stop and take a series of 4 pictures on 2 different cameras. These photos were taken within a few hours of the event and before the police had attended the scene in the early afternoon, so they are as close as we'll ever get to understanding the crime scene in its original form. It's worth noting that the perspective of these images can give a somewhat inaccurate impression of distance, so looking at the scene from multiple angles is quite helpful. Also, the images are best seen full size. Of the photos taken by the tourists that morning, images C and D are of high enough resolution to reveal some interesting clues upon closer examination. During interviews, Brianna's father and the PIs have mentioned the presence of tire tracks being observable in the days after her disappearance, but actually seeing how the tracks relate to the car in situ is quite revealing. The tracks, highlighted in blue, suggest the car was originally positioned next to the water bottle and can at the right of frame, which would have been very close to the driver's side door. Directly below the passenger door, the soil looks to have been disturbed, possibly indicating a struggle or drag marks. What looks to be a recent palm or contact print or similar can be seen center of the passenger door, having been recent enough to wipe away the dirt from the paint. A wrapper or container of some sort, cigarette packet perhaps, and another unidentified object can be seen on the ground by the passenger's door. The rear tire looks to have been elevated high enough to prevent the car from gaining traction after the impact, and there also doesn't appear to be any significant mounding of soil around the tire to indicate any successful attempt at moving the vehicle from that position. In front of the car, 2 tire tracks, highlighted in blue, appeared to end abruptly at a right angle to Brianna's car, which would have blocked her escape if a vehicle was parked in that position. In addition to a group of interior photos, not seen here, of the car taken many weeks after it had been removed from the scene, and an unknown number of photos taken by the police, 2 further low-quality photos were taken of the vehicle at the scene. I assume they were taken by the media as they appeared 5 years later on an NBC5 news report. It's not definite, but the beverage can seen in the higher resolution images next to the water bottle looks to have been removed in this shot. The lime wedge supposedly found sitting on the vehicle isn't visible in the driver's side image as I'd hoped. What can these images tell us? The tire tracks may suggest Brianna was at the location with some intent, having pulled in from the road and had stopped her car parallel to and forward of the building, looking out across the field. The 2 beverage containers were close enough to her car to have fallen out of or off of the vehicle. The tire tracks also indicate a rapid change of direction while reversing to either avoid something behind her or as a result of a struggle with the wheel. The soil disturbance below the passenger door could indicate a struggle or the movement of Brianna from one vehicle to another by an unknown party or parties. The tire tracks that end abruptly in front of the car, if related, could indicate an attempt to block her in or to facilitate her removal to another vehicle. Did she swerve abruptly to avoid colliding with a vehicle that was moving in to block her? The 2 unidentified objects on the ground fall on the direct path from her passenger door to a potential waiting vehicle. Which, if any, of the objects pictured were taken into evidence or were subsequently DNA tested is unclear. As for more detailed speculation on possible scenarios. The photographic evidence of the scene may support, I'll leave that for the comments. But I will finish the post with one scenario that I've not yet seen discussed. The position of her car prior to reversing into the building may indicate she was attempting to conceal the vehicle from the view of westbound traffic behind the building. The building sits on the apex of the bend and would have been a tempting place to hide if she thought she wouldn't be able to outrun a pursuer. Did she perhaps pass a car driving the opposite direction and quickly pull off to hide behind the building in hope they'd pass her, only for them to see her car and pull off to block her in? The structure has since been demolished, but fortunately we can get a reasonable understanding of its orientation and distance from the road from these later images. The satellite images date from 2011. See, I don't know about this theory, because how often would a 17-year-old that's maybe in a partial panic or a full-blown panic, I mean, this isn't a movie, would they really try to back a car and hide, or would they just floor it and attempt to get away? Because if you're in a panic and emotional, I mean, just how often in real life, I mean, you see it in movies with like CIA agents and stuff and spies that back their cars into various areas to try to hide. But how often has a teenager actually, or even a young adult, a college student, how often have they attempted to hide a vehicle in some kind of pursuit? I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that did or didn't happen. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure, but I'm not sure how viable the theory is. Unless the only thing is if that had happened before, I mean, if this is all connected to some drug dealers and hiding from drug dealers, if Brianna had either done that before or had been with someone who had done that in the car, then maybe, yeah, she would try it. But just from the only place you really see that is in movies, where somebody backs a car to hide somewhere. And from the satellite too, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It almost seems like it'd be easier to hide behind a tree line, pull off in the grass. I mean, I don't know. Someone from the area could also comment that was around back when that building was still there, if that was a thing people did. Continuing the post here. Anyway, I hope this post provokes some discussion. At the very least, these images are the highest quality examples I could find anywhere online, so it's nice to have them in a single location for future reference. I'd particularly like to hear any theories on what that unidentified object is. One rumor suggested the offender went back to the scene to collect something that dropped, so that object really sparked my interest. Okay. So let's look at some comments here. So from the CBSNews.com article, Brianna Maitland missing since 2004, DNA identified. This is a March 18, 2022 article. And it actually states those DNA samples were sent to the Vermont Forensic Laboratory, which confirmed that DNA from one of the individuals matched the DNA found on the ground near Brianna's vehicle. So they know who it is. Hasn't been named, though. Also from WCAX.com, a March 18, 2022 article, police source DNA, Brianna Maitland investigation. They obtained DNA samples from 11 persons of interest, and now they say they have DNA from one of the individuals that matched the DNA on the item found near Maitland's car. The 11 individuals that we compared the DNA to were persons of interest. That is how we identified them throughout the investigation in the course of the last 18 years. It was DNA that we had collected in the course of the investigation. Baker said, "We have conducted our due diligence right now, and that person has been very cooperative and spoken to us." So at this time, it is just an active, ongoing investigation to figure out what our next steps are. Now that is a curious statement. So apparently this POI has been cooperative. What does that mean? So does that mean they admitted to being in Brianna's car, let's say, days before, and left the item there that was somehow ended up at the Dutchborn barn during her disappearance? So they're claiming they're not responsible? and they left the item? Or did they actually admit to being with her that night and maybe know what happened? Again, this is all unknown information from this article here. A comment by a particular resident here, local rumor, people come here from New York City to sell drugs for a few months, then go back. The rumor is she got a little too wrapped up with some of these guys and was just really naive. She was their only loose end, so to speak. And we'll actually get into a very, very interesting comment left on a Mindshock video on YouTube that also points to this case unofficially being solved and all parties known and exactly what happened known, which is very curious. We'll get to that one step at a time here. This is Mindshock. I want to comprehensively cover all known information before we get to that. And just to reiterate here, straight from the wiki, I went over this in the previous episodes, but let's keep it fresh. In the week following Maitland's disappearance, the Vermont State Police received an anonymous tip claiming she was being held against her will in a house in nearby Berkshire, Vermont, 10 miles from Montgomery. The rented house, then occupied by Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, two known drug dealers from New York, was raided by police on April 15, 2004. Various drug paraphernalia was recovered inside, as well as substantial amounts of cocaine and marijuana, but no sign of Maitland was found. Ryans was arrested during the raid for drug charges. Upon interviewing Maitland's close friends, law enforcement was informed that Maitland had allegedly experimented with hard drugs in the recent past, specifically crack cocaine, and was an acquaintance of Ryans and Jackson. Now, supposedly, it says that multiple close friends verified this, but I'm just going to throw this out there. If it was maybe one person who started that rumor, whether true or not, and it might not be true. Again, obviously, I'm not pretending to know either way. And supposedly, even if it was true, she had kind of left that life behind, and that was why some of these people didn't want to let her go. Again, these are all just theories. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. And also her friends, supposedly the day after the disappearance, they were threatened by one of these drug dealers in a driveway at McDonald's. That if somehow, if the dealer is blamed for this, they're going to end up like Brianna. Now, how the dealers knew all this information, I mean, when did it become public? I don't know if that's been exactly verified, but, and the fact that her ex-boyfriend happened to drive by the scene, I can't get over that one. That's rough. That's rough, and we'll be getting to that as well. Now, people examining the images here, they theorize that it could be a lid from a can of chewing tobacco, the unknown object on the ground. Some people also think there might be a bullet on the ground. Another post here regarding the boyfriend. Isn't this the case where somehow the boyfriend came across her car randomly at 2:30 a.m.? Reeks of BS to me. How do you randomly spot your girlfriend's car parked in bum expletive nowhere at that time and just go about your night? A response here, it certainly wasn't random. The Dutchburn house was a known hangout for youth in the area. He probably thought he'd check there. I don't think she was killed over drugs or debt. I suspect she was meeting someone there as it was a known landmark in the area. Maybe to buy drugs, have a beer, party. The reason isn't really relevant. But whoever she ran into there, they abducted her. I don't think there's any conspiracy or anything. Nothing to do with New York drug dealers. Just some sick predator. I mean, coincidence theorists are really weird. Like, all of that's coincidental despite all of this evidence pointing to some kind of involvement with these drug dealers. Another post here. I heard he was coming, regarding the boyfriend, I heard he was coming from a party over the Canadian border when he saw the car. It was in the middle of the night and he continued home. He had probably been drinking a little and just wanted to get home at that point. Plus, I think it was her ex-boyfriend, not a current one. Another post by Sleuthing Some. I read quite a bit on this case years ago, and I recall that they believe she was deliberately ran off the road or trapped by a car intending for her to pull off the road. That's why her name is listed as a possible victim of Israel Keys. He was only an hour away, and he confessed to running female victims off of dark country backroads at night to abduct them. People driving by did state they saw someone standing near the vehicle at one point with either the light from a cell phone or smoking a cigarette. There are plenty of good suspects in her case, which makes it hard to pin down. A girl had punched her in the face and threatened her because she believed she was sleeping with her boyfriend. Maitland had extensive martial arts training, so I recall her mom asking her why she just stood there and let a girl punch her without fighting back, and Brianna's answer, which told me a lot about the true person she was, said, "Mom, with the training I have, I could really hurt her for life. A punch will heal, but what if I paralyzed her?" In fact, her training is one reason investigators believe that night she was likely held by multiple people or someone had a loaded weapon. There were signs of a struggle in the car. The necklace she always wore was ripped off her neck and either on the floorboard or just outside the driver's door, along with a bunch of change. She had just left her waitressing job and likely still had on her apron. I mean, how is that like? How did they determine that was likely? Regarding the martial arts training, though, I mean, a 17-year-old girl, even if she's, let's say, an elite, I don't know if she was elite level martial artist. I mean, obviously she had some lessons, relatively proficient, probably would beat up any girls trying to beat her up. But one or two full-grown men, and possibly if she's impaired in some way, I mean, and if she's in the confines of a vehicle during some kind of an abduction, martial arts training, there's only so much that could help when you're fighting off two people. A 17-year-old girl is, I mean, I don't know, unless she was an elite level athlete, and then even so, when there's more, if there's 2 or 3 individuals, like, what is she gonna do? Sure, she might get some shots on one of them, but, you know, I mean, there's world champion martial arts guys getting beat down by, you know, if it's a 3-on-1, especially getting attacked from behind and something of that nature in the confines of a car. So, I don't know how much can be read into that. There was an ex-boyfriend that admitted to detectives he just happened to drive by there that night and see her car, so he stopped and messed around with the car and looked around. I always thought that was a bit suspect, like he was giving that story just in case his DNA was found at the scene, but I don't know. And was it? Is his DNA the one at the scene and he's being cooperative because he really did stop by and saw nothing? And if he was smoking a cigarette or whatever and dropped it there, or a drink or whatever, and that is his drink, but allegedly his story is that by the time he got there, nobody else was there. Is that what who the DNA matched to? Again, we don't know. There was a guy that worked with her that they were also interested in because he liked her. She didn't feel the same way, and I guess he left just before her, and people claimed he was acting strange, whatever strange meant. I don't know if we actually went over that angle. The weird coworker, the potentially weird coworker. I don't know if that's been extensively discussed. I think there was a patron that was discussed, some weird looking guy or weird acting guy that was there. But then there was the fact that she was on drugs and messing around with some drug dealers. I don't know if that's a fact, but she was just 17. Don't fault the kid for experimenting, but I think she was too young to realize that many dealers will come for you if you owe them money or if they think you're talking. I'd read that the guys she was buying drugs from were pretty ruthless and were suspects in another disappearance. If I recall correctly, one of them is dead now. It was an overdose or suicide. I can't remember. So you look at all these possibilities and then realize it could have been some random sociopath as well. Who the heck knows? Well, we do have to keep in mind FBI statistics. Females who are met with foul play, the foul play is at the hands of people known to them. So either a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, friend, acquaintance, co-worker, someone known to them. Not an absolute stranger, a random sociopath. I mean, theoretically possible, yes. But statistically, Much less likely. An interesting point about the tire tracks: could the tire impressions that are visible have been made before the ground froze? And a response here by natural imbecility. This is what I was thinking. Not necessarily that the tracks could have been there for a while, but that it looks like the type of spot that people would pull over into fairly often. When I was in high school, there was an old abandoned house nearby that my friends and I would often meet at before deciding what we were going to do. It was a spot that most of the locals knew was a good place to pull off the road if you needed to do something. Check a map, take a piss, whatever. Another response: yes, 100%. Ground in Vermont in March can still be frozen. Those tracks could have been there since November, October, or earlier. Whenever the ground froze, those kind of scrubby turn-off or parking spaces often find the locals pulling in the same way, making ruts that can be mild or deep. And again, maybe the tracks could have been there from just 1 or 2 days before. It doesn't have to be months, but yeah, I mean, another unknown variable. Another interesting post here from No Context Carl. I don't know if I'm being cynical here, but the police commentary doesn't necessarily seem reassuring that they made major progress here. Is it someone they consider a POI, but could simply mean anyone she had in the car recently for a legitimate and not nefarious reason? Nonetheless, I do want to see this one resolved. It's been way too long. And that's a good point. If she gave someone a ride earlier in the day before, 2 days before, and there's an item in the car with their DNA, what does that prove? Another good post by Sleuthing Some regarding the tire, the wheels, the rear wheels being elevated. I remember reading that as well. That's why she couldn't get out of there. They think she was trying, but that's the specific reason she was stuck. What a horrible feeling. I can't even imagine. I do remember people who passed by that night reported seeing what they thought was either a light to a cell phone by the car, that someone was standing there, or someone smoking a cigarette. And you know what's weird? If something did happen there, did they spot the boyfriend or ex-boyfriend when he saw Brianna's car and he's wondering why it's there and then nobody's there, so he happened there after the crime? Or was it after Brianna was taken away from that location in another vehicle and someone came back to make sure they didn't leave anything? One of the parties responsible. Creepy either way. I always found it awfully coincidental her ex-boyfriend happened to drive by that night and stopped and messed around with the car. I felt like he was trying to give an explanation in case his DNA was found in and on her car. But to be fair though, since it's usually the boyfriend ex-boyfriend, could he just be trying to get ahead of that? So let's say he's innocent, but he would still try to explain it away because he doesn't want to be thought of as guilty. Because he knows people are going to think he's guilty no matter what. It's always the boyfriend or ex-boyfriend. That's the sentiment. Well, statistically, it's highly likely. So he might have just been trying to get ahead of that. This is one of the cases that has many good suspects. The girl that punched her in the face weeks prior, the ex-boyfriend that stopped by the car that night, the drug dealers she was associating with, one of the guys who she worked with who left early and had suspicious behavior. And yet it could have been a random psycho who ran her off the road that night to abduct her. I've even seen her name as a possible Israel Keys victim. He was out there at the time, and he confessed to running women off dark country roads to abduct them, yet I highly doubt it was him. Another post in the Brianna Maitland subreddit. This one is a bit older, but some interesting details here that I don't know have been discussed enough. A few questions by Herman the German. I was doing some deep dive news research recently and a few questions came to mind. One, in an original article about Brianna, there was mention of a white truck being spotted in the area and a patron who flirted with Brianna that night. What happened to those leads? There was also a report of hearing noise as yelling by someone who lived around there, I believe, because it was not clear in the article. No article linked here, however, though. 2. Timothy Powell was one of the people who lived in the house in Berkshire where the police went to check about a month after she was missing. What's his connection to Ryans and Jackson? 3. Jackson has several children. One is with a woman who was also in the Berkshire house. There was another with a second child that was born 2 months after Brianna went missing. I think the first child and the other woman, she's deceased now, had the children around the same time. Was there a love triangle or rectangle there? Question mark. 4. How did Soto fit into this? Ryans and Jackson are alleged cousins. I don't know if that detail has been brought up before. They are still in connection with each other, and Jackson and the first woman he had a child with, who also lived in the Berkshire house, are a couple per social media. How did Soto know them? 5. Where is Soto today? He was sentenced to 8 years at the time, to be followed by a few years probation for selling narcotics. He would have gotten out around 2018. Were there any neighbors walking distance of the inn who knew Brianna and or were sex offenders? 7. I noted that Bruce Maitland had run for a town government seat a few years before Brianna went missing. It looks like, sadly, he lost that race. Could there be any connection there? Perhaps something was revealed about his opponent on the campaign trail and he was still angry about? Seems like a reach, but just kicking around idea. I mean, yeah, if that was years before, I don't know. 8. Do we know if she or her friends ever partied at the Dutch Burn House? That's a good question. I know field drinking was popular in rural America in the 90s, so I was curious if she could have happened upon one and pulled in to check it out. 9. Overacker said it was unlikely, that's the PI, said it was unlikely that her Enosburg High friends knew she worked at the inn because she was on the outs with them. However, it's possible she saw whoever took her, for whatever reason, during that time, and they never mentioned seeing her and knowing about the new job to anyone else. Or someone saw her car at the inn because Rubatail saw it and stopped that night because her car was distinct enough for him to recognize it. 10. How did Ryans know Gia Collins? He moved in with her pretty quick after he hightailed it out of NEK to Burlington. 11. Where was Jillian's father that night? We know she went out of town. Did her father go with her? 12. I found a court record. A few years after Brianna went missing, LaCrosse was arrested for running drugs for a local guy. This is the girl that punched her. She and a cousin of hers, along with a few others, were runners. Did any of the high school friends ever sell or be asked to sell for Ryans, Soto, or Jackson? Could there have been any chance that Brianna stopped somewhere to pick up or drop off drugs on the way to Jillian's that night? This case baffles me. There seems to be a few scenarios. Her car broke down and that's how someone got her, but hard to explain how the car got backed into the Dutch Burn House in that scenario. She stopped off at the house or somewhere else and was taken, and in the latter, the car was ditched at the Dutch Burn House. Someone got her off the road somehow at the Dutch Burn House, or the car was taken back there, or she picked up someone like a hitchhiker and things went south, but there did not appear to be signs of a struggle in the car, which would have likely been the case in such a scenario. Some people allege there are signs of a struggle in the car, including possibly Brianna Maitland's vomit, or blood evidence, or things of that nature. But I don't know if we discussed the possibility that whatever happened elsewhere and then the car was dumped. It just seems like such an unnatural position for someone to dump the car in that fashion. And why wouldn't they just dump it somewhere where it wouldn't be seen from the road, just to buy more time? I don't know, it's weird. A post by user since deleted. My scenario has always been that she met some people there to pay off a drug debt, and they decided that her efforts to pay up were not to their liking, because she, of course, had those uncashed paychecks. They hauled her off, and that was the end of it. The car may have been parked like that by them, or she may have done it in an effort to escape. Signs of a struggle is misleading when applied to a vehicle. Unlike a house, there is little that is not bolted down or attached to something, so it's not as if things can be knocked over, etc., which is the usual sign. Herman the German posted here, from what I have read, many share your theory. The difficulty with that theory is how the timing would have been arranged. She did not have a cell phone. I believe investigators pulled the inn's in and out call logs, and she did not have a specific end time other than perhaps after closing. Another challenge with the theory is that she was a 17-year-old high school dropout. Some of my research suggests that hard drugs were just starting to infiltrate the rural agricultural community. She took her GED test that morning. And see, this is a coincidence that it's hard to overlook this. Because, again, 365 days in a year. So she happened to take the GED that morning. It really sounds like there's some kind of circle of people that don't want her to succeed in life and pull away from them. Just lowly scumbags, dirtbags, the drug crowd. If she really is moving on and getting her life together, what are the chances she takes her GED that morning or that day? Yeah, that morning, and then that night she's abducted and or killed. Or at least abducted. I mean, the coincidence stack quite high. Someone else either warns her not to go to work while she's at the grocery store with her mother, or gives her some kind of a warning that causes her mother to state that her demeanor completely changed. And then that night, she's never seen again after that night. I mean, how many coincidences are we going to stack here and pretend they had nothing, and pretend to know definitively that they had nothing to do with her going missing? I mean, that's a problem for anybody with a functional brain. So continuing with this post here, she took her GED test that morning and had 2 jobs. Not the typical behavior of someone with an expensive crack habit. How many people did she really know who could afford to sell or buy to, and how much debt could she have been in that someone who took such a drastic measure? Not to mention, again, the uncashed check. So clearly she had money coming. Even if we accept the theory, which we cannot 100% rule out, would a drug debt murder typically include taking a body somewhere? It seems like a lot of effort for what, a few $1,000s? The area was searched around the barn. The culprit would likely have needed to know the area well or be in the company of someone who did. The more people in on it, the greater the chance of being caught. That's another interesting question. Because would drug dealers really kidnap her? If they didn't like it, would they not just kill her right then and there, shoot her in the head, run away? I mean, these are not mastermind genius criminals. They've clearly been caught for other crimes. So, I mean, that's a really good question, too. A post by user since deleted. As to timing, I doubt there was any need for an elaborate setup. It's hard to remember now, but back in the day when no one had a cell phone, it was common to arrange on nothing more than a time and hope it worked out. Notice, for example, that much of the humor in Seinfeld is dependent on this type of setup. And in a world with cell phones, the shenanigans no longer make sense in some cases. The time frame is actually large in this case. We just know that she was seen at work and some hours later did not seem to be at the car. So a time after closing seems reasonable. The later 2 points seem to rest on a questionable assumption, namely that she could not have enough debt to justify what happened. In short, when it comes to drug dealers, people can be killed over a very small amount of money, especially in cases where the sellers are dabbling in their own product, which seems likely in this case. There are many people who, when they first start using, are still semi-functional, and I don't necessarily believe she was using heavily. So I can buy her making it to work. She might have only owed enough for a couple of experiments, for that matter. And a key piece of evidence that she was there to pay up is the uncashed paychecks that were found in the car. As to the motives of the drug dealers, as indicated previously, when sampling in their own product, they are not always rational. In any case, many horrible crimes have been attributed to the drug trade, which does not make me surprised at anything they may do. Getting rid of evidence has some obvious benefits, but also consider that a customer who did not pay up, going missing, sends a message to others that they need to pay on time for the goods. I would also not rule out some level of desire for personal revenge, or the desire to extract payment in a sexual sense before killing her. Searching the area around the barn was likely inconsequential here. I believe she was put in another vehicle and possibly taken some distance to someone's private property that may well have never been searched. And I mean, that's a great theory there. A lot of great points there. Now, here are my, this is probably the McGuire, I don't know if I've ever stated a McGuire theory here, and we'll go over the post from the local in a moment, which leads me to believe the case may in fact have been solved unofficially. But just from the outset, just from looking at this information here, from the outside, as an outsider, I just can't shake the fight with the other girl. If Keely LaCrosse really did become embroiled in drug dealing, it is kind of hard to 100% rule her out, not necessarily as a killer or anything, but what if she slipped some cash or possibly agreed to deal for these drug dealers in exchange that they, let's say, beat up Brianna Maitland? What if she lied to the drug dealers or someone else in the circle, not necessarily LaCrosse? Anybody who had it out, because again, she was on the outs with these other girls from this other high school, and Keely LaCrosse, any of her friends, if there was a situation with a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, whatever, these are teenagers, if she wanted to send a message, if she wanted Brianna, like maybe she didn't even want Brianna killed. I mean, that'd be kind of dark if she did, because if she did, this theory would also work. But let's say she just wanted Brianna beat up. What if she lied to Jackson and Ramon Ryans, possibly Soto, and told them that Brianna was going to the cops? What if she had heard that Brianna took her GED that morning, she was moving away, she was going to be successful, she was going to leave all of them behind, or she assumed that, whether true or not. Again, we're dealing with irrational teenagers here, possibly also on drugs. But even if not, we're dealing with crazy teenagers here. Teenagers aren't known for their ability to think things through, especially when they're enraged over slights, real or otherwise. It seemed to be real in this case. Again, boyfriend situation, whatever. So she lied to the drug dealers and told them that Brianna was going to the cops, even if she wasn't. Or perhaps Brianna did buy, let's say somebody else, she bought from somebody else who bought from the dealers. What if there was some kind of lie that Brianna didn't pay, and the dealer that Brianna bought drugs from, they pocketed the money and didn't forward the cut to Ryans or Jackson? And they lied and said that Brianna didn't pay even if she did. So in these two scenarios, there's lies being told about Brianna, and there's there's a message that needs to be sent. Maybe, again, certain vengeful, vindictive females, they set up other females to either be exploited or sexually assaulted by other men as some kind of vengeance. So what if they put these drug dealers up to assault Brianna in various ways, beat her up? Maybe they didn't want her killed, but they wanted her humiliated and assaulted, etc., etc., and then something went wrong and they accidentally killed her. They hit her too hard, or she fought back and they got really mad and they ended up killing her. Maybe not at the Dutchburn house. So they took her somewhere else, they kidnapped her, they were going to assault her at a house or whatever, and then things got out of hand and she died, and maybe that tip was real. Maybe it was legit. But by the time the police got there, she had already been killed and the body moved, or not killed and moved somewhere else and then killed later, if she's dead again. But to me, it just, from looking at all the information from the outset, connecting all these dots, it really does not seem that these drug dealers would have just randomly killed her for not paying. It seems like it's more likely that there were lies told about her, or there's some kind of vindictive agenda by some teenage girl or girls to get back at Brianna for wanting out, wanting to move on to a better life. And you see this all the time, not resulting in kidnapping and murder, but with just groups of friends. You see it when somebody begins to do really well and kind of pull away from a certain circle, there's resentment there. It usually doesn't end up in assault, murder, or kidnapping. Sometimes it does. Is this one of the cases where it did? Because we do have an actual assault. We have a possible cheating situation between Brianna and a boyfriend of LaCrosse, and possibly other girls took LaCrosse's side. And is this them trying to get back at her? Now, just from looking at all the information, from digging through this case for the past few years, I mean, I've been looking at this case almost as long as the Montgomery case. Obviously, there's not enough episodes in this series just because the information, there's not as many rabbit holes as in the Montgomery case. There's only a few different scenarios in the Brianna Maitland case. Obviously, it still deserves the same amount of attention, but there are less rabbit holes. Now, Is it possible the ex-boyfriend knew something about this but was intimidated by the drug dealers? Or maybe he never even knew for sure and he didn't want to know because he thought they would kill him. Again, we're dealing with teenagers here. We're dealing with extremely naive, emotional, illogical teenagers. These aren't super genius and early admission students to MIT and Harvard. And even if they were, they'd still be teenagers who are still emotional. So, yeah, I mean, that just seems to me, again, this is just the McGuire theory. I am not alleging it is true or untrue, but that's the scenario that I think fits the pieces of the puzzle the most based on available information. Now, obviously, there's unknown variables. That's why I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. This is Mindshock. Another interesting post here by Twisted Sister 68. I can see only 3 reasons why her car was found as it was. 1, she was drinking or high and wrecked herself. 2, someone else was driving. That's a good one. 3, she was backing up trying to get away fast. I think she was meeting someone there and parked on the corner of the house. There was some kind of altercation or argument, and she jumped in her car and tried to back it up. I think whoever she was meeting jumped in and pulled her out, but left the car in gear, and the momentum made it hit the building. That's actually a pretty good theory. I believe one of the witnesses said the headlights were on and the driver's side door was open when they saw it. Later, the door was closed and the lights were off. Being pulled out of the car while it was running would explain the way the car was found. She was probably grasping for whatever she could hold on to and hit the blinker shift. What happened after that? I believe she was injured then. I don't see any way you can get pulled out of a moving car and not have some injury. Since there was no blood or any other side of fatal injury, I don't think she died then. Whether or not she died as a result of her injuries or was murdered, not sure, but if she died from injuries, whoever had her at the time is still at fault for withholding medical care. Whatever her fate, it did not happen at that building since there was very little biological material found. I hope her family gets a resolution soon. So, yeah, a lot of possibilities there. Also, just touching back on the McGuire theory and the person that warned her at the grocery store parking lot. Is it possible that whoever warned her was trying to do her a favor? Perhaps it was part of the group of these people that didn't like Brianna, but they have a conscience. So even though Brianna might have not liked them per se, they did not feel comfortable with what the group was planning to do to Brianna and gave her the warning. Because if they knew where she worked, someone could have followed her from work or simply known the route that she would drive. So that seems to be connected as well. It's kind of hard to pretend that that's not connected. It seems to be a critical piece of the puzzle. So let's get to our final point here. This is a post on the Mindshock YouTube from a local. I live in this town, and most people here believe it was a drug overdose. And the people she was with buried her under some concrete. They were pouring the following day on private property. I mean, this was shades of the Montgomery case, because apparently there were at least 2 foundations that were being poured with cement immediately after the Montgomery disappearance, which is a strange curiosity in that town. But anyway, with this comment here, the following day, they're pouring concrete. It's kind of weird. I mean, that's kind of weird. How often is that done in winter? Allegedly, because nobody wanted to be caught with her body or get in trouble for drugs and a resulting death of said drugs. Allegedly, she died with other people. Those people called her boyfriend and his friend for him to deal with. And they, according to rumor, dug a hole in the spot they were planning to pour concrete the next day in a barn, and then poured the concrete as scheduled over the grave. Okay, so if the concrete was to be poured inside a barn and the plant that it was already scheduled to be poured anyway, and then they just simply put the body, that actually makes a little bit more sense. 3 of the people who were allegedly involved, again, solely according to the families and friends of said people, are dead at this point, which means they are not around to confirm, deny, or even defend themselves against this theory. This is purely according to other people who did have close connections to Brianna and the other 3 deceased guys. Supposedly, some people even called in this tip where they heard the body was, but nothing really came of it, probably because it could easily be town gossip. And it could definitely just be town gossip. But the people here are very close, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point the people involved confided in friends and family. I can't stress enough that this is purely a theory many people believe. They have their reasons for believing it, and I'm simply sharing the theory some of the people close to the case believe. It doesn't make it true. Okay. So this is a very, very interesting post here by this alleged local. And it actually does match a lot of information in the case. Now, whether or not this was some of these individuals are Jackson and Ryan's or one of them, but if they're not, does it make sense that Ryan's and Jackson would be pissed if anyone tried to pin this on them if they weren't responsible? Maybe they were responsible for selling Brianna and or her friend, or let's say the friends that were with her, the drugs, but they weren't actually there. And even if she overdosed on the drugs that they sold to the people, they weren't there, so they don't consider themselves responsible for anything because they weren't there. So these other people that Brianna was partying with, if this happened, the problem with this theory is, again, the car. Because why would the car randomly have been back? I mean, it seems like there was some kind of violent struggle. So, or is it the case that if whatever vengeful girls wanted to set her up, they were setting her up with people that were close to her, or some of these drug dealers, whatever, and Brianna, I mean, if there was a warning, what was the warning about? If it was a warning about other people and she didn't know that the drug dealers were roped in, maybe she thought the drug dealers could provide her protection. I mean, how dark is that? And it turns out that they were the ones employed to harm her. That would be very dark as well. But regarding the concrete and these locals, so they have, I'm assuming the locals, she's hearing this, the locals, that these people are all named. I believe Bruce Maitland also said they have the names of these people and they actually went to one of these houses. So, again, I don't know if they actually searched the barns and checked to see if there was any body in concrete, but, I mean, just going back to the early days, and supposedly there are names of people. According to the police, there's 11 POIs. So if this local is talking about these 3 or 4 people who are not the drug dealers, I believe they would have their names as well. Somebody's named them. Bruce Maitland has names. Now, whether they're responsible or not, that's another matter. But there are certain locals that believe they know exactly what happened. That she was with people. Now, they might not know the exact circumstances of how she died, but it's just, things just don't add up here. So it seems like it's really one of 2 theories, but if Brianna was done with drugs, she had just taken her GED that morning. She wants to move on to bigger and better. Does it seem like this was more of a vindictive setup than her wanting to party? On the other hand, is this a case of she already passed her GED and she's going to party one last time? I mean, I don't know. How likely is that? I mean, people closest to Brianna would probably have the best insight to that, people who talked to her that day and the previous day. But from all available info, it seems like she's moving on from this. And maybe some people don't want her to, and they're still holding grudges for a variety of different things. Again, these are teenagers and young people. So, just a very, very haunting case. But if the locals really do know, or the drug dealers know, do the police actually know but simply can't prove anything? Even if they have DNA of people at the scene. Was the boyfriend really called to deal with the situation? Does the boyfriend know who the other people are? They called him, right? That would explain why he's at a party in Canada. Somebody calls him, tells him what's going on, and that's why he drives there. Was there somebody else with him? It's just, there's so many coincidences here. Is it really possible he's completely uninvolved? Is it possible the drug dealers are completely uninvolved? Is it possible that these vindictive mean girls are completely uninvolved? Again, let's keep in mind the statistics. Females are harmed by people known to them. Or is this really a death by misadventure where she's just dabbling in drugs and she happened to, it doesn't really make sense with the car. The car is really, I think the situation with the car, the way it's backed into the barn, I mean, how many other cases have that exact setup? I can't think of a single one. And that makes it seem like there was some kind of violent interaction, which does not point to innocent partying. So that is all the information for now. Any locals, feel free to comment and give your thoughts and theories on what happened. Or if you know for sure, obviously nobody has to name names, but if you know for sure that names were named, and so police have the names, locals know exactly what happened, feel free to chime in, because is this one of these cases where it's unofficially solved and it's all known, simply not publicly proven? Hope everyone out there found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative in the Brianna Maitland series. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats and help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.